I helped a new student nobody spoke to, and the principal pulled me aside with a life-changing announcement. Principal Dawson handed me a sealed envelope at 2:37 on a Friday afternoon, right after I'd spent lunch sitting with the new kid everyone was avoiding. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with my name typed across the front in formal letters. Michael Torres, it read. Private and confidential. I'd been called to the principal's office during 6th period, told it was urgent, walked past the secretary's pitying expression into Dawson's private office, where he sat with two people I'd never seen before. A woman in a business suit with a briefcase, and a man with a detective's badge clipped to his belt. They all looked at me with expressions I couldn't read, something between concern and respect. Michael, Principal Dawson said, his voice unusually gentle. What you did for Alex Chen this past month, the way you befriended him when everyone else excluded him, that took real courage. I need you to understand that your actions may have saved his life. And in the process, you've helped us uncover something we've been investigating for 2 years. Open the envelope. My hands shook as I tore it open, pulled out documents that made no sense. Police reports, witness statements, photographs of bruises, screenshots of text messages, medical records, and at the bottom, a letter of commendation from the district attorney's office. I'd been a junior at Riverside High School in suburban Portland for 2.5 years, living the standard teenage existence of classes, homework, weekend hangouts with my small group of friends. I was 17, decent grades, played soccer in the fall, generally kept my head down and didn't cause trouble. My parents both worked full-time, my dad as an accountant and my mom as a dental hygienist, and we lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. I wasn't popular, wasn't a star, athlete or honor student, just solidly average in the way most teenagers are. Life was predictable, comfortable, unremarkable. Then Alex Chen transferred to Riverside at the start of October, and everything shifted in ways I didn't understand until it was too late. He showed up on a Monday morning, assigned to my homeroom, a quiet kid with dark hair and nervous eyes who barely spoke when Mr. Hastings introduced him to the class. The reaction was immediate and strange. Within hours, it was clear that someone had decided Alex was persona non grata. Nobody would sit with him at lunch. Nobody would partner with him in class. When he tried to join conversations, people would make excuses and walk away. It was systematic, coordinated, cruel in its efficiency. I noticed it because I'd been on the receiving end of social exclusion before, back in middle school when I'd been the new kid, and spent 3 months eating lunch alone before finally making friends. I remembered how that felt. The isolation and confusion, the wondering what you'd done wrong. So when I saw Alex sitting by himself in the cafeteria that first Friday, surrounded by empty tables despite the packed room, I made a choice. I grabbed my lunch and sat down across from him. Hey, I'm Michael. Mind if I sit here? Alex looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, surprise and suspicion warring on his face. Why? Why what? Why do you want to sit with me? Everyone else acts like I'm invisible. Because everyone else is being weird about it and I don't get why. You seem normal enough to me. That lunch conversation was awkward, halting, Alex clearly waiting for some kind of trick or cruelty that never came. We talked about classes, about teachers, about the soccer team, and whether Riverside had a decent music program. Normal stuff. By the end of lunch, Alex had relaxed slightly, even smiled once or twice. Same time Monday? I asked as we cleared our trays. If you want. He said it cautiously, like he still expected me to bail. I showed up Monday, and Wednesday, and every day after that for the next 3 weeks. The backlash started almost immediately. My friend group, guys I'd known since freshman year, pulled me aside after school that first Monday. What are you doing sitting with Chen? Derek, my best friend since 9th grade, looked genuinely concerned. You know he's bad news, right? Bad news how? He just got here. Trust me, just stay away from him. Everyone knows. Knows what? Derek exchanged glances with the other guys, Nathan and Owen. Look, there's history. Chen's got problems. His family's got problems. You don't want to get mixed up in that. When I pressed for details, they got vague. Something about his old school, about incidents that had happened before he transferred, about how he was trouble, and everyone had agreed to just avoid him. It sounded like bullshit to me, like the kind of rumors that spread for no reason and destroyed people. I told Derek I'd make my own decisions, about who to have lunch with. He'd shaken his head like I was making a huge mistake. By the end of the second week, my friend group had started excluding me too. Not overtly, not with confrontation, just gradually uninviting me from plans, sitting at different tables, creating distance. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, losing friends over the crime of being decent to someone. But I was stubborn enough to keep sitting with Alex anyway. Alex started opening up slowly, carefully, like someone who'd been burned before and was testing whether I was safe. He told me about his old school, about how he'd been bullied there, about his parents divorcing and his mom moving them to Portland for a fresh start. He didn't go into details, but I could hear the pain underneath the careful words. When I asked what had happened to make everyone at Riverside avoid him, he went quiet. Someone started a rumor before I even got here. Said I was dangerous, said I'd done something at my old school. It's not true, but once people believe something, they don't let go. What rumor? What are they saying you did? Alex looked at his lunch tray. That I hurt someone. That I'm violent. That I can't be trusted. The words came out hollow, resigned. But it's not true. I've never hurt anyone. Things happened at my old school that weren't my fault, and someone here found out and twisted it into something else. I believed him. Maybe that was naive. Maybe I should have been more skeptical. But looking at this quiet kid who flinched when people raised their voices and apologized constantly for taking up space, I couldn't see violence. I saw someone who'd been victimized and was being victimized again. Things escalated in the 4th week. I started finding notes in my locker. Warnings, anonymous and vague. Stay away from Chen. You don't know what he is. You're making a mistake. I threw them away, figured it was just my former friends being dramatic. Then someone spray-painted Chen's bitch on my locker overnight. The janitorial staff cleaned it off before first period, but not before half the school saw it. People started treating me the way they treated Alex, avoiding us both, whispering when we walked by, creating a bubble of isolation around anyone associated with the new kid. My parents noticed I was coming home quieter, asked if everything was okay at school. I told them it was fine, just friend drama, nothing serious. I didn't mention the notes or the graffiti or the systematic exclusion because I didn't want them to worry, didn't want to seem like I couldn't handle high school social politics. On a Thursday in early November, someone shoved Alex into a locker between classes. Hard enough that he hit his head, hard enough that a teacher saw and sent both Alex and the other kid to the office. I didn't see it happen, but heard about it within minutes, the story spreading like wildfire. Alex Chen got into a fight. Alex Chen is violent just like everyone said. The other kid, Brad Sutherland, claimed Alex had started it, had provoked him. Alex said Brad had shoved him unprovoked. The assistant principal suspended them both for 3 days pending investigation. I visited Alex that evening, drove to his apartment complex on the east side of town and knocked on his door. His mom answered, a tired-looking woman in scrubs who worked as a nurse. You're Michael? Alex mentioned you. Thank you for being kind to him. He doesn't have many friends here. She let me in. Alex was in his room, icing a bruise on his forehead. His room was sparse, barely furnished, moving boxes still stacked in one corner. I sat on the edge of his desk. What happened? Brad shoved me. Called me something I won't repeat. I didn't fight back, just tried to walk away, but a teacher only saw the end when I was against the locker. Now I'm suspended, and it's going to look like I'm violent, and everyone will believe the rumors even more. His voice cracked. I can't do this anymore, Michael. I can't. Keep being the target. My old school was bad enough, but at least there I had some friends. Here, I have nobody except you. And now, they're coming after you too. I thought about the graffiti, the notes, the former friends who'd abandoned me. Yeah, they are. But I don't care. You didn't do anything wrong. Brad's the one who should be suspended permanently. Alex shook his head. It doesn't matter what's right. It matters what people believe, and everyone believes I'm dangerous. I didn't have a good response to that. We sat in silence for a while. Then Alex asked, why do you keep sitting with me? Everyone else decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Why are you different? I thought about it. Because someone did the same for me once. When I was the new kid in middle school and everyone ignored me, one person sat with me and made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I'm just passing it forward. That's it? That's it. Alex studied me. You're either the best person I've ever met or the most naive. Maybe both. I laughed, despite everything. Probably both. When I left that night, Alex's mom walked me to the door. Thank you for being his friend. I know it's cost you. But Alex, he's been through so much. His father, the divorce, what happened at his old school with those boys. He needs someone like you right now. I wanted to ask what had happened at his old school, what she meant by those boys, but something in her expression stopped me. Instead, I just nodded and promised to check in while Alex was suspended. Over the next 3 days, I did some research, found Alex's old school's website, searched for news articles, tried to figure out what rumors had followed him to Riverside. Found one article from 8 months ago, local student testifies in bullying case. The details were vague, names redacted because everyone involved was a minor, but it described a group of students who'd systematically bullied another student, escalating to physical violence and threats. The bullied student had reported it, testified against them, and several students had been expelled. The article mentioned that the victim had transferred schools afterward for his own safety. I realized with cold certainty that Alex had been the victim, not the perpetrator. He'd stood up to bullies at his old school, gotten them expelled, and somehow that story had been twisted into him being dangerous. The question was, who had twisted it, and why? I spent those 3 days asking careful questions, trying to figure out where the rumors about Alex had started. Eventually traced them back to a single source, Brad Sutherland, the kid who'd shoved Alex into the locker. Brad had been telling people before Alex even arrived that the new transfer student was violent and troubled, that everyone should avoid him. Brad, who was friends with Derek and Nathan and Owen. Brad, who'd apparently decided to launch a preemptive campaign against someone he'd never even met. When Alex came back from suspension on Monday, I confronted Derek directly. Why did Brad start rumors about Alex before he even got here? How did Brad even know Alex was transferring? Derek looked uncomfortable. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Brad's been spreading lies about Alex for weeks. Where did he get his information? Derek glanced around, made sure nobody was listening. Look, Brad's cousin went to Chen's old school. Heard about what happened with the expelled kids. Brad decided it would be funny to mess with Chen when he transferred here. Started telling everyone Chen was the problem instead of the victim. It got out of hand. The casual cruelty of it made my stomach turn. Brad destroyed Alex's reputation as a joke? And you all went along with it? Derek shrugged. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just some hazing for the new kid. But then you had to go and become his friend, and Brad got pissed that his prank wasn't working. That's why he shoved Chen into the locker. To prove Chen would fight back, prove he was violent. Except Chen didn't fight back, so Brad just looked like a bully. My hands clenched into fists. You're telling me this entire thing, the isolation and the rumors and the campaign against Alex, was because Brad thought it would be funny? Derek backed up a step. I didn't say it was right. I'm just explaining what happened. You need to back off, though. Brad's not happy about you interfering. What's he going to do about it? Derek didn't answer, just walked away. I should have gone to a teacher right then, should have reported Brad and explained what had been happening. Instead, I was 17 and stupid, and convinced I could handle high school politics on my own. That decision almost got someone killed. 2 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, Alex didn't show up for lunch. I waited at our usual table, checked my phone for messages, asked around to see if anyone had seen him. Nothing. He wasn't in our shared afternoon classes either. By the end of the day, I was worried enough to text him. No response. Called him. Straight to voicemail. Drove to his apartment after school. His mom answered, looking panicked. Have you seen Alex? He didn't come home from school. I called the office. They said he was marked present this morning, but nobody's seen him since third period. My chest tightened. No, I haven't seen him since last night. We should call the police. We did. They said we have to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report for a teenager unless there's evidence of immediate danger. But Michael, Alex was upset this morning. Really upset. He showed me his phone, these text messages he'd been getting all week. Horrible things. Threats. I should have done something, but he asked me not to make it worse by getting the school involved. She was crying now. What if something happened to him? What if he hurt himself? I took her phone, looked at the text messages. They were from anonymous numbers, dozens of them over the past 5 days. Kill yourself, Chen. Nobody wants you here. You should have died at your old school. We're going to finish what they started. Your mom would be better off without you. Each message more vicious than the last, a coordinated campaign of harassment that had clearly been organized by multiple people. I felt sick reading them. Mrs. Chen, I need you to call the police again. Tell them Alex is receiving death threats and has disappeared. Show them these messages. This is evidence of immediate danger. While she called, I texted Derek, Where's Alex? What did Brad do? The response came back 5 minutes later. I don't know what you're talking about. I tried calling Brad directly. He didn't answer. I drove around Riverside, checked the school parking lot, checked the park where I knew Alex sometimes went to clear his head. Nothing. As it got dark, my panic increased. Alex had been getting death threats and now he'd disappeared. Either he'd run away, hurt himself, or something worse had happened. Mrs. Chen called me at 8:36. The police are taking it seriously now. They're sending officers to search. They want to talk to you about Alex's friends at school, about anyone who might know where he is. I met Detective Raymond Foster at the police station at 9:15. He was in his early 50s, 26 years on the force, and he looked grim as I showed him the text messages from Mrs. Chen's phone. This is targeted harassment from multiple sources. Do you know who might be sending these? I told him about Brad Sutherland, about the rumors and the systematic exclusion, about the locker incident and my conversation with Derek. Detective Foster took notes, asked for names, asked for details about the social dynamics at Riverside. Then he asked, Has Alex ever mentioned wanting to hurt himself? His mom seems worried he might be suicidal. No, never. Alex has been dealing with horrible treatment, but he's not. He wouldn't. I stopped. Would he? Had I missed signs? Had my stubborn insistence on fighting the social politics made things worse for him? Detective Foster must have seen something in my face. You're not responsible for other people's cruelty. If Alex is in danger, it's because of the people who targeted him, not because you tried to help. We're going to find him. They found Alex at 11:43 that night. He was in an abandoned building near the school, bloodied and unconscious. Someone had jumped him after third period, beaten him badly enough to fracture his ribs and cause a concussion, then left him there. He'd been lying in that building for over 8 hours, bleeding and alone, while the temperature dropped and nobody knew where he was. Alex was rushed to Portland General Hospital, admitted to the ICU with serious injuries. The doctor said if he'd been there much longer, he might not have survived. Mrs. Chen called me at 1 a.m, sobbing. They found him. He's alive. He's going to be okay. But Michael, what they did to him. What those boys did. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process the idea that this had escalated from rumors to attempted murder. The police arrived at my house at 2:15, woke up my parents, asked if they could talk to me about the assault on Alex Chen. I told them everything I knew, about Brad, about the rumors, about the text messages and the systematic harassment, about Derek and Nathan and Owen and their involvement in the social exclusion, about my conversation with Derek where he'd explained Brad's prank. Detective Foster took notes on everything, then said, "We need you to make a formal statement. We also need you to wear a wire tomorrow at school. Based on what you've told us, we believe multiple students conspired to assault Alex Chen. We need evidence to prove it. We need conversations, confessions, anything that ties specific individuals to the attack." My parents were horrified. "You want our son to go undercover at his high school, to record his classmates?" Detective Foster's expression was sympathetic but firm. "We have a 17-year-old boy in the ICU because a group of students decided to brutally assault him. We have evidence of systematic harassment and conspiracy. But we need testimony and recordings to build a prosecutable case. Michael has access to these students, has their trust to some degree. If he's willing to help, we can make sure the people responsible face consequences. Are you willing?" I thought about Alex lying in that building for 8 hours, about the text messages, about Mrs. Chen's terrified voice on the phone, about how I'd known something was wrong and hadn't done enough to stop it. I'm willing. They fitted me with a recording device Thursday morning, a tiny microphone hidden under my shirt that transmitted to a receiver in an unmarked van outside school. Detective Foster and his partner, Detective Lisa Yamamoto, 17 years on the force, gave me instructions. Don't push too hard, don't accuse anyone. Directly. Just have normal conversations and see what people say. If anyone admits to knowing about the assault or being involved, that's what we need. The goal is to identify who actually attacked Alex and who helped plan it. Walking into Riverside that morning felt surreal. Everyone was buzzing about Alex being found, about the assault, about how serious it was. I sat down at lunch with my old friend group, the table I hadn't been welcome at for weeks. Derek looked surprised. "What are you doing here? I figured we should talk. About what happened to Alex, about what Brad did." Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "We don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Alex was jumped yesterday after third period, beaten badly enough to end up in the ICU. And I know Brad's been planning something ever since Alex didn't fight back last time." Derek glanced at Owen. "We had nothing to do with that. We weren't there. I didn't say you were. But you knew Brad was planning something, didn't you? When I texted you asking where Alex was, you knew." Owen stood up. "I'm not talking about this. We didn't do anything." He walked away. Nathan followed. But Derek stayed, looking conflicted. "Look, I didn't know it was going to be that bad. Brad said he just wanted to scare Chen, make him transfer again, get him to leave. He asked if we'd help create a distraction so Chen would be isolated after third period. We said yes. We didn't know Brad was going to, that he'd bring other people, that they'd actually hurt him that badly. So you helped set up the assault." Derek's face went white. "We created a distraction. That's all. We didn't hurt anyone. You conspired in a felony assault. Derek, Alex almost died. Do you understand that? If he'd been there another few hours, he would have died. And you helped make it happen." Derek stood up, his chair scraping. "I'm done with this conversation. You're trying to get me to confess to something. I'm not stupid." The recording had captured everything. Derek, admitting they'd helped create a distraction, that Brad had recruited them, that there had been other people involved in the actual assault. It was enough to start building a case. Over the next 2 days, Detective Foster and Detective Yamamoto interviewed students, pulled phone records, examined the text messages sent to Alex. They identified 6 students total who'd been involved in planning or executing the assault. Brad Sutherland had organized it, recruited 3 other students to help with the actual beating, and convinced Derek, Nathan, and Owen to create diversions to isolate Alex. All 6 were arrested Friday morning, charged with conspiracy to commit assault, aggravated assault, and in Brad's case, attempted murder. The school erupted in chaos. Parents demanded answers. The media showed up. Principal Dawson, who I'd barely interacted with before this, called an emergency assembly to address the assault and the arrests. He stood at the podium looking haggard. "What happened to Alex Chen represents a complete failure of our school culture and our vigilance as educators. Multiple students conspired to harm another student based on rumors and cruelty. We failed to recognize the warning signs. We failed to protect Alex. That ends now. Riverside High School is implementing immediate changes to our bullying policies, our reporting systems, and our administrative oversight. Any student who witnesses harassment is required to report it. Any administrator who fails to act on reports will face consequences. We will not tolerate this kind of behavior again." That was when Principal Dawson called me to his office, when he handed me that envelope with the police reports and witness statements and commendation letter from the district attorney. The woman in the business suit introduced herself as Attorney Jennifer Cross, Chief Prosecutor for Juvenile Crimes in Multnomah County. The man with the badge was Detective Foster. They explained that my recordings had been crucial, evidence in the case against the 6 students. That my willingness to help despite personal risk had potentially prevented future violence. That Alex had told police from his hospital bed that I'd been the only person who'd stood by him, who'd believed him, who'd tried to protect him when everyone else had decided he was disposable. Principal Dawson handed me a second envelope. This one contained a letter from the school board, announcing that I was being awarded the district's Student Integrity Award, which came with a $5,000 scholarship. There was also a letter from Alex, written from his hospital bed. Michael, I don't know how to thank you. You saw me when everyone else looked away. You sat with me when I was alone. You believed me when everyone else called me a liar. You risked your friendships and your safety to be decent. That's not something people do anymore. You saved my life in more ways than one. Thank you. I'll never forget it. The trial for the 6 students happened over the next 4 months. I testified about the systematic harassment, the rumors Brad had spread, the conspiracy I'd witnessed. Alex testified from a wheelchair, still recovering from his injuries, about the assault itself. Mrs. Chen testified about finding the death threats on her son's phone, about the terror of those hours when he'd been missing. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone records showing the coordinated text messages, security footage from the school showing Derek and Nathan creating the diversion, testimony from witnesses who'd seen Brad and the 3 other attackers leaving the abandoned building, DNA evidence and blood spatter analysis that confirmed who had participated in the beating. Brad Sutherland was tried as an adult, convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy, sentenced to 15 years in juvenile detention, transferring to adult prison when he turned 18. The 3 who'd helped with the beating got 10 years each: Derek, Nathan, and Owen, who'd created the diversion but hadn't participated in the actual assault, were convicted of conspiracy and sentenced to 3 years in juvenile detention. All 6 had their lives permanently marked by felony convictions. All because Brad had thought it would be funny to torment the new kid, and everyone else had gone along with it. Riverside High School changed after the trial. The administration implemented strict anti-bullying policies, mandatory reporting, anonymous tip lines. Teachers were trained to recognize signs of systematic harassment. Students who'd watched it all happen started speaking up about other issues, other victims they'd ignored. The culture shifted from one where cruelty was tolerated to one where intervention was expected. Alex recovered slowly. The physical injuries healed over months, but the psychological damage took longer. He stayed at Riverside, determined not to let Brad and his friends drive him away again. We remained friends, sat together at lunch, studied together after school. Other students started joining us, people who'd been too afraid to associate with Alex before, but now felt safe. By the end of junior year, Alex had a full friend group, people who genuinely cared about him. He even smiled sometimes, that guarded expression gradually replaced by something more open. The scholarship money from the Student Integrity Award helped cover my college applications senior year. I applied to schools with strong criminal justice programs, discovered I wanted to study law, wanted to become the kind of person who could help victims like Alex get justice. Got accepted to University of Oregon with a partial scholarship, planned to major in legal studies. The summer after graduation, Alex and I drove to the coast, spent a weekend camping and talking about the future. He'd gotten into Portland State, was planning to study psychology, wanted to help other kids who'd been bullied. We sat on the beach watching the sunset, and Alex said, "You know what the weirdest part is? If Brad had just left me alone, if nobody had bothered me, I would have just been another quiet kid who graduated without anyone noticing. Instead, he tried to destroy me and ended up destroying himself. Created this whole chain of events that changed everything. And you could have ignored me like everyone else. Could have protected yourself and your friendships. Why didn't you? I watched the waves. Because someone has to be the person who sits down first. Someone has to decide that cruelty isn't acceptable, that isolation isn't okay, that treating people as disposable is wrong. If I'd ignored you, someone else might have helped eventually. Or they might not have. And you'd have been alone for however long it took. I didn't want to be the kind of person who sees someone suffering and walks away. That's it? That's it." Alex was quiet for a moment. "That choice you made, sitting with me that first day, it saved my life. You know that, right? If you hadn't befriended me, if nobody had been paying attention when I disappeared, I might have died in that building. And even if I'd survived, I don't know if I would have survived the aftermath mentally. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." I thought about Principal Dawson's words, about how my actions may have saved Alex's life, about the envelope full of police reports and witness statements and commendation letters, about the trial and the convictions and the way Riverside had changed, about Derek and Nathan and Owen in juvenile detention, about Brad facing 15 years for attempted murder, about how one choice to be decent had cascaded into justice, into systemic change, into lives permanently altered. 5 years later, I was in law school at University of Oregon, studying criminal justice and civil rights law. Alex had graduated from Portland State with a degree in psychology, was working as a counselor for at-risk youth. We still met for coffee every few months, compared notes, on our work, talked about the kids we were trying to help. At one of those meetings, Alex told me about a 15-year-old he'd been counseling, a kid who'd been systematically bullied at school and was considering dropping out. I told him the same thing someone once told me. Someone has to be the person who sits down first. I sat with him at lunch, just like you sat with me. And you know what? 3 other kids joined us by the end of the week. Because someone broke the ice. Someone showed it was okay to be kind. That's what you taught me. That one person deciding to be decent can change everything. I graduated law school and joined the district attorney's office in Multnomah County, working under Jennifer Cross prosecuting crimes against minors. My first major case involved a bullying ring at a suburban high school, systematic harassment of a transfer student that had escalated to violence. As I reviewed the case files, I thought about Alex, about how easily that could have been him, if things had gone differently. We got convictions on all 4 defendants. The victim, a 16-year-old girl who'd been tormented for months, wrote me a letter afterward. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for fighting for me when it felt like nobody cared. You reminded me that justice exists, that cruelty has consequences. I'm going to be okay now. I kept that letter on my desk, right next to the one Alex had written from his hospital bed 10 years earlier. Reminders of why the work mattered. 10 years after sitting with Alex that first time, I was a prosecutor with a reputation for taking bullying cases seriously, for believing victims, for fighting for justice even when it was complicated or unpopular. Alex was a licensed therapist, running his own practice specializing in trauma and adolescent victims of violence. We still met for coffee, still talked about the work, still remembered that day when everything had changed. At one of those meetings, Alex said, "You know what I think about sometimes? How many Brad Sutherlands are out there right now, tormenting people, getting away with it because nobody wants to get involved? How many kids are sitting alone at lunch, wondering why nobody cares, whether it's worth staying alive? And how many potential Michaels are walking past them every day, seeing the suffering and choosing to look away because it's easier?" I took a sip of coffee. That's why we do what we do. To be the people who don't look away. To create systems where victims get heard and bullies face consequences. To make it easier for the next person to be brave. Alex nodded. That day you sat with me. You know what you really did? You showed me that I mattered. That I was worth the risk. That despite everything Brad and the others were saying, I was a human being deserving of basic kindness. That saved me. Not just physically from the assault, but psychologically from giving up. Because if one person thought I mattered, maybe I did. Maybe I was worth fighting for. That's the lesson. That's what people don't understand when they say bullying is just part of growing up, or kids need to toughen up, or one person can't make a difference. One person can. One person choosing to sit down first can save a life. 15 years after that first lunch, I was appointed to a juvenile justice reform committee, working on statewide policies to prevent school violence and protect vulnerable students. Alex testified before the state legislature about the psychological impact of systematic bullying, about the failures of institutional response, about the need for comprehensive intervention systems. Together, we helped pass legislation requiring schools to implement strict anti-bullying protocols, mandatory reporting for staff, and protection for students who reported harassment. The bill was nicknamed Alex's Law informally, though officially it was the Student Safety and Intervention Act. At the signing ceremony, the governor mentioned our story, talked about how one student's courage to help another had led to justice, to systemic change, to statewide reform, how tragedy had been transformed into purpose. That night, Alex and I went back to Riverside High School, walked through the halls that had once been a war zone of cruelty. The school had a memorial now, a plaque in the main hallway, in memory of those harmed by bullying. May we always choose kindness over cruelty, intervention over indifference. May we be the person who sits down first. Alex stood in front of that plaque for a long time. You know what Brad took from me? He took my sense of safety, my ability to trust easily, my belief that people are fundamentally good. Those are things I'm still working to get back, even 15 years later. But you know what he gave me accidentally? Purpose, direction, a reason to fight. I became who I am because of what happened, became someone who helps people like me survive their own Brad Sutherlands. And you became someone who holds people accountable, who fights for justice. We took something horrible and built something meaningful from it. I thought about that envelope Principal Dawson had handed me, about the moment everything had shifted from teenage social politics to life-changing purpose, about the choice to sit down at a lunch table with someone nobody else would talk to, a choice that had seemed so small at the time, but had cascaded into careers, into legislation, into lives saved. About Brad Sutherland, who'd spent 10 years in prison and would spend the rest of his life as a registered violent offender, his future destroyed by a cruel prank that had spiraled out of control. About Derek and Nathan and Owen, who'd served their time and now lived with the permanent consequences of going along with cruelty instead of standing against it. About the hundreds of students Alex and I had helped over the past 15 years, kids who'd been where we'd been and needed someone to believe them. 20 years. After sitting with Alex that first time, I was a senior prosecutor. He was a renowned trauma specialist, and we co-authored a book about bullying intervention and institutional responsibility. The book told our story, told the stories of other victims we'd worked with, provided practical frameworks for schools and parents and students to recognize and combat systematic harassment. It became required reading in education programs across the country. We did interviews, gave talks, traveled to schools to share our message. One person can make a difference, cruelty has consequences, and choosing kindness over convenience can save lives. At a school assembly in rural Oregon, A 15-year-old student raised his hand during the Q&A. What if you sit with someone being bullied and then everyone turns on you? What if you become the target? I looked at Alex, then back at the student. That might happen. It happened to me. I lost friends. I got graffiti on my locker. I became a target alongside Alex. But you know what I didn't lose? My integrity, my sense of self, my knowledge that I'd done the right thing. And eventually, the truth came out. The bullies faced consequences. The systems changed. Justice happened. Not immediately, not easily, but it happened. Because someone was willing to stand up first. The student nodded slowly. The girl next to him, who'd been sitting hunched and silent the whole assembly, looked up for the first time. After the assembly, that girl approached us. She thanked us for coming, for sharing our story. Said she'd been thinking about transferring schools because of the harassment she'd been facing. But now she was going to talk to the principal instead, going to report it, going to fight. The boy from the Q&A walked up too. Said he'd sit with her at lunch starting tomorrow, that he wouldn't let her face it alone. We watched them leave together, two kids who'd just made the choice to fight back against cruelty. Alex squeezed my shoulder. That's why we do this. Right there. Those two kids. They're going to be okay now. And maybe they'll inspire someone else. Maybe it'll cascade the way it cascaded for us. 25 years after sitting with Alex that first time, we stood together at Riverside High School's renovation ceremony. The school had been completely renovated, rebuilt with safety and inclusion as core design principles. Open spaces where students could gather, counseling centers easily accessible, surveillance systems to prevent isolated areas where violence could occur unseen, a culture of intervention built into the architecture itself. The principal, a woman named Dr. Rachel Dumont, who'd been hired specifically to maintain the reformed culture, gave a speech about the school's history, about the assault that had happened 25 years ago, about the students who'd been arrested, about the systematic changes that had followed, about Alex Chen and Michael Torres, who'd transformed tragedy into purpose and helped create the frameworks that now protected students statewide. We're standing here today in a school that's fundamentally different from the one where Alex was assaulted, a school where bullying is recognized and addressed immediately, where students are empowered to intervene, where victims are believed and supported, where perpetrators face consequences. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because two teenagers made different choices than the ones expected of them. One chose to sit with someone nobody else would talk to. One chose to survive and fight back. Those choices changed everything. After the ceremony, Alex and I walked through the school, past the memorial plaque, through the halls where we'd both been targets, past the cafeteria where I'd first sat down at his lunch table 25 years ago. I thought about that moment, about how I'd had no idea what I was starting, how that simple choice would define both our lives. We ended up in the parking lot where Alex's mom had picked him up that first week, where I'd sometimes waited with him to make sure he got home safe. Alex leaned against his car, looking back at the building. You know what I realized? That first day you sat with me, I was planning to transfer. Was going to tell my mom that night that I couldn't handle Riverside, that I needed to go somewhere else. But then you sat down, and I thought maybe there was hope. Maybe one friendly person meant there could be others. Maybe I could survive. So I stayed. And everything that happened after, the assault and the trial and the reforms in our careers, all of that came from you making me believe I was worth staying for. I'd never known that. Never realized how close Alex had been to leaving, how that one lunch had been the deciding factor. The weight of that settled over me. What if I hadn't sat down? What if I'd just grabbed my lunch and sat with different people, avoided the whole situation? Alex smiled. But you did sit down. You made the choice. And 25 years later, we're standing here looking at a school that's completely different because of that choice. Because you decided that being kind was more important than being popular. That's your legacy. Not just helping me, but changing a system that let people like Brad thrive. Creating a world where the next kid like me doesn't have to wonder if they're worth saving. We drove back to Portland together, talked about our families and our work, and the book tour we had coming up. Normal conversation between two friends who'd been through something extraordinary and built their entire adult lives around making sure it didn't happen to others. 25 years after sitting with Alex at lunch, I realized that Principal Dawson had been right. My actions had saved Alex's life, but they'd also saved mine. Because if I'd walked away, if I'd chosen comfort over courage, I'd have become someone I couldn't respect. Someone who saw suffering and did nothing. Someone who let cruelty win because standing against it was inconvenient. Instead, I'd become someone who fought for justice, who believed victims, who held perpetrators accountable, had built a career and a purpose around that single choice to be decent when decency wasn't popular. Alex had become someone who healed trauma, who helped survivors, who gave hope to kids in their darkest moments. We'd both transformed our pain into purpose, our trauma into tools for helping others. And it had all started with a choice to sit down first, to be the person who broke the ice, to decide that kindness mattered more than social politics. That simple choice had cascaded into reforms, into legislation, into careers, into hundreds of lives changed, had taken a moment of cruelty and transformed it into a lifetime of justice. The envelope Principal Dawson had handed me 25 years ago sat in a frame in my office now, a reminder of the moment everything changed. The police reports and witness statements and commendation letter from the district attorney, the Student Integrity Award, and the scholarship. Alex's letter from the hospital. All of it proof that one person choosing to be decent could change the world. Brad Sutherland had tried to destroy Alex as a joke. Instead, he'd created two people dedicated to making sure kids like him faced consequences, making sure victims like Alex survived and thrived. Had accidentally inspired exactly the kind of systemic change that would prevent future Brad Sutherlands from succeeding. That was the real justice. Not just his prison sentence, but the fact that his cruelty had sparked its own opposition, had created the very people who would spend their lives fighting what he represented. And all because one 17-year-old had decided to sit with the new kid nobody else would talk to. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.